Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Jumpstart session. We're going to be talking today about writing in graduate school. So, we've been talking about a lot of different topics over this week, and today is another really important one because as you make a transition from let's say it's undergrad to grad or another graduate degree to graduate school again, graduate school is going to challenge you in different ways, and it's going to push you in different ways, especially when it comes to writing and how you write. So today I have a great guest with us today. Vicki Dawson is with us, and Vicki is our Writing Center coordinator. And the Writing Center here at the University of Michigan-Flint is a definite resource that you want to take advantage of while you are a student here. Whether you are a on-campus student where you're here all the time or an online student, you can still take advantage of resources. And Vicki will talk to you about those resources today. But she's also going to give you a number of other tools, resources, tips that are going to help you in making that transition into graduate school even smoother. So get out your pen and paper. Make sure to take some notes because you're going to be able to get some really good insights here today from Vicki. Vicki, thanks so much for being here today.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. How are you today? Is everyone doing well? A little quiet? All right. I don't blame you. It's kind of late in the afternoon. So as Christopher Lewis said, my name is Vicki Dawson. Oh, looks like somebody else needs to be in. My name is Vicki Dawson. I'm the Writing Center coordinator. I've been the coordinator since 2016. And I actually started at U of M-Flint as an undergrad back in 1999. So I have an extensive knowledge of the university. I absolutely love it. I never wanted to leave. I cried both times when I graduated with my undergrad and grad because I think it's such an amazing place. Great resources, fantastic supportive faculty. The staff are fantastic. So I really hope you have an amazing time here at U of M-Flint. And I am always here as a resource if you ever have any questions. I actually started out as a biology major. I thought I was going to be a physical therapist. Um, I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't have a lot of confidence in my writing, which is kind of funny given my position now. But I could memorize anything and I was pretty good at science. So I thought I would be a physical therapist. But the more that I took classes, the more that it was really calling me to go into writing. I really wanted to be a writer. And so I took the leap of faith, and here I am today. And because of the challenges that I faced, to develop as a writer, I've developed a lot of really interesting techniques that I'd like to share with you today, to maybe help you on your journey if writing is something that you're concerned about. I think one thing that students often either ignore or sometimes procrastinate on or undervalue or underprepare for is writing. Writing is one of those critical skills that you not only need for your degree, but also it's great practice for developing professional level skill sets that you're going to need in the field. So a lot of students in the graduate programs don't want to use the Writing Center because they're like, well, it's mostly undergrads. How are they going to help me? But my argument to that is if you can't explain what you're writing about to someone else, you don't know it well enough to be able to write about it yet. So if you can explain it and teach someone else what you're working on and what you're doing, it's going to make your writing a lot more effective, a lot stronger, and it's going to be a much easier process for you. So I highly recommend working with tutors, whether that's our undergraduate tutors or even our newly minted hired dedicated graduate writing tutor, Amanda Sini. She's worked with us for over 4 years while she finished up her undergrad and then her master's degree. And then we created a position and she was able to take into or go into that position. So we do have a dedicated graduate tutor, but I definitely don't want to undervalue what our undergraduate writing tutors can do as well. So with that, I'm going to get started. Um, let's see. At the Writing Center, we work with all stages of the writing process from just getting started all the way through to the final draft if you want another pair of eyes and ears on it. So don't feel like you need to wait until the end to get feedback. It's actually better if you get feedback earlier. The earlier you can catch issues in your writing, the much easier it's going to be. I worked with a graduate student one time who wrote 50 pages of their literature review, and their committee basically said, you need to start over. They were crushed by that. If they had gotten help much earlier, maybe they could have avoided some of the pitfalls that they had. So that's just one kind of caution to have, is make sure that you're really getting feedback and support all along your writing process. Don't wait too long to get that support. We serve undergraduates as well as graduate students, and even faculty come and work with us, and from all disciplines. So from the health sciences to the engineering fields, English, you name it, we see faculty from across campus. We also serve as a friendly accountability partner. So if you struggle with time management, and you work like me, much better with a deadline, we can service that. So if you make an appointment and you know that you're going to be working with me or Amanda, that kind of gives you that impetus to try to get things done a little easier so it's not piling up. Graduate students or graduate school is going to require a lot of you, and many of you, I'm sure, are already working in a professional field as well as trying to go to grad school. So having that accountability partner to keep you on task and to keep you going along is going to be a really great resource for you. So some of the presentation topics today, sorry, I have a double screen, so if it looks like I'm looking away, that's why I'm looking at my big monitor over here. We're going to think of, or look at things to remember, some important topics. Undergraduate versus graduate writing. There is a big difference between those two. Planning and time management, resources and support, general writing tips, and went a little too far, and general writing tips. But, this is a workshop about writing, so you're not going to get away without writing. So what I'd like you to do next is I want you to write a 1 to 3 sentence bio. So just real quick, take a few minutes and just write a 1 to 3 sentence bio. I'll give you 1 more minute. And don't worry, this isn't going to be tested or graded. All right. I hope you have your bios. So the question that I had for you is, what decisions influenced your bio? Come on, there's only a few of you. We can chat. Does anybody want to talk about what things may have influenced how they chose to write their bio?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, thank you, Philip.
Just trying to be concise. Be concise with only having 3 sentences to try to communicate a lot in a short amount of time.
Exactly. Good, good. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you, Philip. I know it's kind of late in the afternoon. Oh, somebody else is here. So I want to apologize in advance. Oh, Priscilla, please, do you have a question?
Oh no, I just wanted to share what's influenced my bio.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. So to me, my experiences and my ambition or goal in life made up my bio.
Good, good. So those are all great things to include in a bio, right? So this is a little bit of a got you, and I apologize for that in advance. My boss actually gives me grief for doing this, but there's a really good reason why I did this is if you think about your bio, I could have written about what I'm like as a writing center coordinator, or I could have chosen personal and professional facts. But which one's right? Which bio's correct?
It depends on what it's being used for.
Exactly. Exactly. Great. So the gotcha is none of you asked me for clarification about what the ultimate goal was. And so that's okay. I mean, in this short little activity, that's not a problem. But what if you get an assignment from one of your instructors and you make an assumption about what you think that instructor's looking for? You write 50 pages and it's not. This is a much less painful lesson about that than if you've written that much work and not clarified. So it's really, really critical to make sure that you're asking questions and getting clarification. So each of you had some really great things about bios, which are fantastic, but I didn't even say whose bio to write. It could have been mine. It could have been someone else. It could have been, anyone. So it's really important to make sure that you are being very proactive about what is that instructor looking for, because they are going to be your primary audience, but they're not your only audience. Other people in your classroom may also be considered your audience, but also you're writing for a hypothetical professional audience as well. And some of you may be publishing your work in journals and whatnot. So you'll want to make sure that you're following what those expectations would be. So I apologize for the little gotcha, but I hope this one helps you to remember to ask good questions. All right, so what are some of the differences between undergraduate and graduate writing as far as topics? When undergrads are writing on a topic versus a grad student, do you have any ideas about what the differences between those two might be? Or even in general, what you think the differences are between undergrad and grad?
More technical writing in graduate school, a more higher expectation of technical skill in writing in graduate school as opposed to undergraduate.
Yes, yeah, that's a big one. Other ideas?
I think you have to prove, you have to research and prove what you're saying.
Yes. Yes, good. Other ideas? All right, so I'm going to share a couple of lists with you and then we can talk about those if you have questions. So for undergraduates, typically they're going to be given a prompt from an instructor, or they get to choose from a sort of narrow kind of prompt category that they might be able to write from, whereas graduate students are more likely to be writing from a research question, something that they are trying to fill a gap for within the field that they're a part of. The research for an undergrad is going to be much smaller, so they might be looking at 4 or 5 articles that they're including, whereas a graduate student might be looking at 20 to 100 different articles that they're including in their research. So their research is going to be much more extensive and in-depth. The analysis for undergraduates is they're going to often just be restating the work of someone else. They're practicing paraphrasing, they're practicing weaving in conversations, but really they're sort of mimicking what's out there and trying to get a sense of, how to do this thing. Whereas graduate students are really entering into that scholarly conversation. So the expectations are much higher. So you're going to be building on it. So you're going to be looking at what other people are saying and then entering that conversation that other people will then be looking to as a resource as well. The purpose for undergraduates, it's really to sort of measure their learning and their understanding of material. Whereas graduate students, as I said, it's really to further a body of scholarship within their own fields. So do you have questions about that?
How do you further a body of scholarship?
Great question. I'm going to go into that a little bit more, probably in a couple of slides, but basically for undergrads, they're going to be looking at a topic, say they're interested in coffee, for instance. They're going to learn how to narrow that and then look to see what people have said about coffee under a specific thing, say trade, for instance, the correlation between coffee and trade. Whereas a graduate student is going to look at the body of research around coffee and trade and see what's missing so that they can add to it. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So as I mentioned, you're entering a scholarly conversation, and one of the ways that I help students understand how they're going to do that is every time you read an article, think of them as a panelist. How are they looking at this particular area of research? How are they understanding it? How are they explaining it? How are they arguing it? How are they adding to what other people have said? Every time you read an article, you're reading to understand where they're coming from and why. So if you've got 10 scholars that you have read now, you're sitting in the audience listening to what they say. Now, when you start to write about it, you are now entering that conversation and you're narrating that conversation for someone else so that they can understand it. And you're also making arguments or points about how and why they're saying things that they are. I hope that makes sense. The other thing that's important to think about is diction in graduate writing is important. So the kinds of words that you're using, the vocabulary, the jargon, but you want to use it carefully. You don't want it to impede understanding. You don't want to use so much jargon that someone's like, I have no idea what's Vicky's saying. I had an instructor do that to me one time. I really wanted to impress her and show her that I had a command of all of the vocabulary from my discipline. And she handed my paper back and I was so embarrassed because at the top it says, Vicky, I have no idea what you said. She said, it's good that you're trying to use these kinds of words, but if you can't use them in a way that someone else can understand it, that's a problem. So readability and clarity are more important than anything else. That's something that you really want to focus on is if you're using a big word in there or some jargon technology or jargon word, try to define it in a smooth way so that someone's like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. And now that they understand it. The other thing is you can't rely on your instructors to just automatically understand it because they also want to know that you understand it. So if it's something that's really common within your fields, and your instructor would think, okay, why are you telling me what this is? You know, this is so common, we don't really need to explain it. That's different. But if there's a new sort of word or terminology that's coming up in your field, you may want to define it so that your instructor understands that you're able to code switch between these. The other thing is you also want your writing to be accessible to not just expert readers, but also a lay reader, so a common reader. That's why working with a writing tutor is so great, because they can also be that accountability measure. Like, I see you using a lot of these words, but I'm having a really hard time understanding what this is. Oh, can someone mute their thing? I'm hearing a little bit of that. Thank you. I'm having a hard time, you know, following this. And oftentimes as tutors, we're not going to say, you should change this. What they're going to say is, I'm feeling excluded from this a little bit. I'm not quite sure where you're going for here. But if this is technical terms that are very common within your field, you don't necessarily need to explain them to me, but they're just going to give you a gentle nudge to reconsider, or at least look at that to see whether or not you may need to define it or use more common terms. But that doesn't mean that you have to take their suggestions. It's just another accountability tool to see how accessible your writing is to a lay audience. And so, as I mentioned, sources are really like panelists. And when you're writing in grad school, you're not taking your sources as a laundry list. You're looking at them collectively as well as individually. So if we're writing about coffee and trade, for instance, and 5 authors are all talking about similar things with it, you can talk about that as a collective. You know, scholars are saying X, Y, Z, and in your citation, you list all of those different resources that you found. However, if one of them says something in particular that's really insightful or really captures an important point, then you can focus in on that one particular scholar. So you're not taking them as a laundry list, you're taking them as a collective as well as an individual to look at specific topics that you're going to develop in your paper. And so I think that's something that is a big shift from undergraduate writing to graduate writing. And I see that often in graduate students that have maybe been out of school for a long time. It's a bit of a shock to write that way. And so if that's something that you're concerned about, definitely come see us. We're happy to talk about it. Let's see. All right, so I found these 2 graphics that really kind of help capture what it feels like and looks like for the differences between a literature review and your own research. So a literature review, as I said, you've got this topic, you've got your thesis question, now you're out looking for research. Each of those puzzle pieces represents an article that you've found or some information that you found. Your job as the graduate writer then is to piece together the puzzle, the picture of what's there. What are the scholars saying about the topic that you're interested in, and what aren't they saying? What gap are you now going to add to the field of scholarship? And so when you do that and you start putting those pieces together, you start to see where things fit together nicely or not so nicely, and also where there's gaps. That's where your research is going to come in, and you're not going to be covering the entire picture. You're going to be focused in on one specific section. However, your literature review is going to show that picture so that the reader, your instructors know that you have a sound foundation for what's going on in the field for this broad picture. But then how is your specific research going to fit into that? What are you going to fill in that's not there, or that may need to be rethought of? Maybe it's something that's old and needs to be revisited, or things have changed. How are you going to improve or fill in a gap? Does that make sense? Any questions? All right. So So I love Bloom's taxonomy. I think it's a really great pyramid to kind of show how one learns. And so the first thing is remembering. So when you're reading research, you're reading it and then you need to remember it in order to be able to use it later. You're also reading it to understand it. You're also reading it to learn how to apply it to a situation. You're also reading it to analyze it, what's going on with this, and to evaluate its merits and how it connects to other information. Then you get to create. The reason why this pyramid is so important is too often, whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, rushing through this process is going to cost you time. It's better to spend more time making sure that you understand it, you know how to apply it, how it connects to others' work before you start writing. Otherwise, if any of you are knitters, you're knitting along and all of a sudden you've got this big hole, it's really hard to go back and fix structure that's got a hole in it. Make sure that you understand it in the early stages before you start drafting. Make notes, work with the information, have conversations with it, talk about, I'm not sure why they're saying this, or how does this connect to this piece? So do a lot of work, talk to your sources when you're working with them, when you're reading them. It's really important because once you get to the writing stage, you've got that data. You need to organize it in a way that's easily accessible so that you can refer back to it when you're reading it or when you're writing. So you're close reading it to understanding it, to make meaning, to make those connections, then to evaluate it and organize it, and then to draft it into a whole. So I know it sounds like a lot, but believe me, if you spend more time on each piece, every time you read an article and work with it and understand it, it's going to be a lot easier. And I'm going to show you a tool that can make that much easier. But before I do that, you need to think about who's on your team. Like I said, grad school is going to ask a lot of you. You've probably got family, other jobs, a lot of things that are competing for your time and attention. The university has a lot of resources, and I want to share who and where those are. Emily Newberry is amazing. If you have not met Emily Newberry, you need to. She's fantastic. She does all of the research and scholarship stuff. She also does some really great workshops on systematic reviews about how to collect, understand, and organize scholarship and research. So definitely put Emily Newberry on your speed dial and your chat, whatever you need to do, but make sure that she's #1 on your support list. And she's super fun. Believe me, I absolutely love Emily. She's great. And I mentioned Amanda Sini. She's there on the left. She is our new graduate academic program specialist. We are very fortunate that we were able to get her as a half-time position because we really value and recognize the need for our graduate students to have dedicated support. Chase there on the right, he's unfortunately left us now. He's going to be teaching in Japan, but he had graduated with his undergrad. And if you wonder about the value of our undergraduate students, he worked with a faculty member on their publications for 1.5 years. So our undergraduates are pretty darn good rock stars. So any of them can help you. But Amanda is our dedicated graduate tutor. So I highly recommend that whomever you work with, develop that relationship and keep working with them, because the more familiar they are with the work that you're doing, the easier it is for them to give you feedback. So if there's one thing that you write down that you take away from today, please, it's this: chunk your time. Break things up into small, manageable pieces. It's going to be a whole lot easier. The stress that I see students going through is when they wait. They're like, I'm just going to knock this out this weekend. I'm going to spend 8-10 hours on it. And then they get there and, the laundry needs done. The kids want their attention. The spouse wants to go to the grocery store. All of those things that are going to prevent you from writing are going to happen. I know, because I was there. And it's easier if you can break it up into small, manageable pieces. So for instance, I'm going to sit down. I'm going, whichever days of the week that you plan on doing your research and your writing, keep it consistent because you're training your brain to be ready to do that kind of work. It's going to be ready for it. If you procrastinate and put it off, it's going to feel overwhelmed. It's going to be upset. You've really got to treat your brain like your best friend because it really is going to be. And, no one wants to feel taken advantage of or, asked to be stressed and whatnot. And your brain's going to be, they're going to resent you and they're going to act out, So you really do need to think of your brain as sort of, this other part of you that you need to really honor and respect. Otherwise, it's going to rebel. Believe me, I'm speaking from experience there. So if I'm going to work on my thesis question, I'm going to say, okay, Monday for 30 minutes, I'm just going to play with my thesis question. I really want to narrow that down. The reason why it's important to make sure that you have a clear, focused thesis question is it's going to prevent you from spending tons of time on research that's not important. In some of the scholarship that I've read about writing in grad school is there's a lot of interesting stuff out there. Don't get stuck on it. It's going to waste a lot of time. It might be interesting. Look at it later when you're done. Bookmark it, whatever you need to do, but don't get sucked down that rabbit hole. Stick with what you're working on. So develop your thesis question so you know exactly what it is that you're looking for. Talk to your librarians so that they can give you great resources on the best databases to look for information. It's going to save you a lot of time. So make an appointment with Emily. She's more than happy to share that with you. Source evaluation. What I finally learned in my own grad program is, I would have a date with one article. For 1 hour, I'm going to read this article and I'm going to make notes. I'm going to put it in my information management chart so I feel really solid on that article. It's also going to help determine what other information I need. If I'm trying to do 5 articles at a time, my brain's going to get tired. I'm going to hate it. I'm going to resent it. But I can spend 1 hour in the morning and do this or 1 hour in the evening. Whatever time management works for you, try to do that. Try to be consistent and block it out. Oh, we got more and more people coming in. Close reading and collection, analyzing, evaluating it, and citing it. Here's another thing. Please highlight this, star it, put a check mark. I don't know what you have to do, but do not wait to put your citations in. Always, if you take a direct quote, if you paraphrase something, for anything that I can say, please put in the page number in the source. The number of times I've worked with someone, even in the undergrad and grad, who said, I'll go back and put those in, you are risking a lot. One, you're risking time because now you're wasting time having to go back for something that could have taken, less than a second to do. Or 2, forgetting and getting dinged for plagiarism, which can have some very serious consequences. So please, please do not wait to put in your citations. That is critical. That's just for research. So block out that time, whatever it is, if you're going to spend 10 hours per week on research, figure out which days of the week you're going to do that, have a dedicated time so that it's easy. Writing is the same thing. You want to have dedicated small chunks that's manageable that you won't resent. Organization and outlining, set a dedicated time for doing that. Get feedback, make sure that this organization is working, whether that's from your instructor, from a classmate, from the writing center, or maybe all of them. Make sure that it's working so that you don't run into problems later on with things really not working. Organization can be kind of tricky for some graduate students, especially if they've been out of school for a long time. Like I said, it's not a laundry list. You're working with a collective of scholars that are talking about specific points, not scholar by scholar. So getting feedback. The first draft, get feedback again. Then revise, second draft, get feedback and revise, add, until you're done. So really revising in layers is really important. Any questions? Sorry, I know I'm throwing a lot at you. It's the mom in me. I can't help it. I just want to make sure that you have everything, but I do realize a lot of this we'll just go over. So I have told Chris that I will give you the PowerPoint. So you'll have that when he sends you a copy of the thing. So you will have this available as well. So when you're doing your research and you're reading those articles, here is a giant list of things, a list of questions to have next to you when you're reading so that you can get a sense for the overall picture of what this article is doing or what this scholar is doing. So what is the source's expertise? That's really important to make sure that you have high quality research that you're using. What are their contributions to the field? What specific piece of that puzzle have they filled? Is it peer reviewed? Believe me, that's really critical at the graduate level. How recent or old is the research? If you're in the health sciences or the social sciences, anything over 5 years is considered outdated unless it's a seminal research that is something that's being built on. So make sure that you're really looking at dates for research. How thorough is it? What kinds of methods are they using? What kinds of research tools did they use? What have they said needs more research? What doesn't seem to be discussed? What work have they built upon? How and why? How well does this apply to your research? And what specific piece of it applies to what you want to do? How does it help support that? So that's how you're building that picture, that little brain picture that I had earlier. These are the questions that are going to help you to understand, analyze, evaluate, and synthesize it with other research. So when I was in my graduate program, my husband came upstairs and I was practically in tears. I had paper everywhere. I had highlighters everywhere. I had books everywhere. It was overwhelming. And he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I don't know what to do with all of this. It's all running together. I just can't figure this out." And he's an engineer, and he said, "Well, you just need to figure out how to organize it." And I'm like, "Duh," you know, but I sat with it for a few minutes and I realized Word has a really great function where you can put in charts. And that's when I became the chart queen. And so this is what I did is for each source that I had on the left-hand column, I put in my thesis question or my thesis statement. The thesis question and statement, if it's written really well, is a roadmap for your entire paper. And so it also has the keywords for the things that you're going to be researching. So I put those keywords on the left-hand side, and then for each column, I have a source. And because writing and creating citations is two very different brain processes, I didn't want to mix them. So I did the easy thing first. I focused on developing the reference citation immediately so that I didn't have to worry about it when I was in the drafting phase. I just needed to put it in my reference. So I put that up there. Every time I found a direct quote that I thought would apply to my thesis, I put it in. I didn't stop there though. I paraphrased it and I made sure I put in the citations. Then I explained how and why I wanted to use that in my paper. This is a critical step because when you start working with the information that way, your brain starts to process it and go, "Oh," and it starts making connections. When I put source 2 in it, on the left-hand side, you see the key terms there. They're all, this is where you see the panel coming together. They're all talking about the same piece or same topic. So when I was done, and I could make a Word document as long as I wanted, I would never be able to print it, but I could start to look across and see how all of these scholars were talking about the same thing, or agreeing or disagreeing, or maybe not talking about it. So when I started to write my paper, I could then talk about them as a collective. If there was one thing that I really liked about what one of them said, I could say, according to scholars, they're saying blah, 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 blah. However, Smith specifically states blah, 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 blah. That's how you really start to talk like a scholar. And this made it so much easier for me that when I started teaching undergrads, I made them do this chart, and they complained. But then when they were done, they said, Vicki, my paper basically wrote itself. I'm like, exactly. This is how you can work with your brain to do chunks. This doesn't hurt. I can spend an hour a night doing one article and filling this out. And after 7 days, I've got 7 articles. If I do this for a month, I've got 30 articles, right? So it doesn't take very long, and you can really see how this starts to work. And you've already started doing the brain processing. And you can also say, okay, I don't need this article because it's basically saying the same thing that this person is saying. So you can already start to synthesize, evaluate, and understand how these scholars are talking or agreeing or disagreeing with each other. And I thought I was really smart and developed this all on my own, but come to find out this is pretty common in grad school. I just wished I had found it a lot sooner. So I hope this helps you. Any questions about my information management chart?
Yeah, hi. I just have something to say and a question. Okay.
Okay, sure.
Regarding the technology, so recently I've noticed that there are really a lot of programs out there that are making the writing process so much easier
Mhm.
and so much more organized. Like, for example, there's RefWorks, which basically allows you to cite any page on the internet or any source that you come across and save it, and then turn it into a bibliography. Even though it has some, it's not perfect, you still have to work with it, but it's, it helps along the way. And there's this other program I came across which organizes. I'm sorry, by the way, I'm driving, so I hope the highway noise isn't. There's this program that organizes as you write, it organizes your citations. And then when you come to reorganize what you've written, like to edit it, it will move your citations and the numbers accordingly. I just forgot the name, but it's really amazing, and it's really very helpful compared to back in the day when you had to do everything manually. And the question I have, which is sort of like, it's just a philosophical question, but is quantitative research still terrorizing qualitative research, or have things changed? I haven't been to school in 8 years.
I think that would be a question to ask your instructors, because I think that would depend on each discipline. So those things kind of change based on which field you're in.
All right, thank you very much. That's all. I
Yeah.
just wanted
All
to
right.
light
So
up. Okay.
yeah, I also wanted to talk about, or go back to your thing about with RefWorks and some of those assistive technologies. Be cautious with those, because I've had faculty call the Writing Center and complain that students are relying on those and not double checking them. I really like those tools, but I still go back and do the manual work of making sure that it's doing what it should be doing, because sometimes garbage in, garbage out. And also those citation styles change frequently, and those technologies don't always keep up very quick. So believe me, especially if you're going into the health sciences, the faculty are very particular about it. If you're going into social work, nursing, OT, PT, RT, any of those, they are very, very hard on APA. They want to make sure that it's correct. And it's something that I also wanted to talk about as well, is Students get frustrated. I think both students and faculty get very frustrated. In the Writing Center, we kind of get caught in the middle between these two. Faculty are like, why can't students get the APA? Why can't they get these citations? And the students are like, why do we have to do these citations perfectly? You know, I want to focus on the content. I want to focus on what I'm learning. So there are two arguments to both of these. On the faculty side, you are entering an elevated conversation. You are entering a professional field, and you represent the university, and you're going to be their future colleague within that field. They want to make sure that you are doing things that represent them in the university well. It's also, those methods are the ways in which they organize, think about, and structure their own fields. So they have a lot of rules and whatnot that make sense because of the work that they're doing. So have those conversations with your faculty. Don't just assume that it's this, you know, frustrating check mark that you have to do. It also shows your own professionalism, your ability to write within that field, and to follow those kinds of conventions. On the student side, just know though writing and citation styles are two different brain processes. Mixing them together is going to be very overwhelming and frustrating. If you use an information management chart like this, it's going to be a lot easier because you're separating those two thinking capacities so that they don't overwhelm you. So make sure that you're you know, doing them ahead of time when you're not stressed out and frustrated. And as far as the kinds of qualitative and quantitative research, it really depends on whichever field that you're in. And what kinds of things that you're doing. And unfortunately, I'm not an expert in that. My background is English. And so ours is going to be a lot of qualitative. We're not doing a lot of the quantitative. We're not doing a lot of studies and whatnot, some, but not a lot. So really asking your faculty and having those great conversations about what those expectations are, what's new or different within those fields, and what those expectations are will be important. I hope that answered those questions.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. So again, when you're thinking about your sources, are they agreeing? Are they disagreeing? Are they adding ideas? Do they provide background context? Are they reliable? Are they using methods that are replicable? And what aren't they saying? So really go in with a critical eye when you're reading these sources. The first draft can be kind of overwhelming, but if you've done the legwork ahead of time, it's not going to be as overwhelming as if you hadn't. Believe me, I've seen both. So I hope I've given you enough tools that can make that a little easier. A pro tip is, okay, so faculty call me up all the time and they get really mad when students are putting results in the methods section. So make a note, don't put results in the methods section if you're in those kinds of fields that you're doing that. Read the articles as you're reading them for information. Also read them for the conventions of writing within your own field. You'll actually learn a lot of great writing tips based on what scholars are doing. So the fact that you're reading hundreds of articles potentially over the course of your academic career, you are slowly absorbing those kinds of conventions, but try to be more proactive in noticing them. It'll really help you when you go to write your own stuff. Some tips: create a writing routine. Again, prime your brain to be ready to go when you're ready to go. End on an interesting point so that you want to go back to it. Trick yourself, think of your brain, like a kid who doesn't want to do something. So what are you going to do to make it want to get back to work? That's the best thing you can do, is end on an interesting point, create a to-do list if that's something that works for you. Some people will even end in the middle of a sentence because it's something that gets the brain, they want to finish it, right? So whatever little tricks you can do to try to get yourself back into the writing groove is really helpful. Revise in stages. too often we'll end up with students giving us 40-page papers and say, can you fix this, or can you edit this? So a little note about the Writing Center. We are part of an institution of higher learning. We are not going to line by line edit your work. That doesn't mean that we won't help with grammar or citations. We are going to point out patterns that we noticed in your writing to help you build stronger writing skills. The more that you work with us, and we can't cover everything in one sitting. So we're going to look at the big picture things. We're going to look to see that the thesis statement, the question, makes sense to us as a reader. We're one reader, we're not your instructor, so all of our feedback is just suggestions for you to consider. We're going to look at the synthesis and the analysis that you've got there. Does it make sense to us? Does it seem to meet the assignment guidelines if you provided those for us? Does it seem to fit the discipline's conventions based on what we understand them? And does it make sense to us overall? So we're really going to look at those big picture things first. Then we'll start looking at the paragraphing. Is it focusing on one idea? Does it make sense? Are your sentences building an idea so that it fully captures that one idea? Are you using strong transitions and voice markers, like according to Smith, they state blah, blah, blah. Are you quoting and paraphrasing well? Are you using the correct point of view for your discipline? Is it concise, or are you being really wordy or using too much jargon? Then, if all of that seems to be going pretty well, then we'll start focusing on grammar, spelling, sentence length, citation format, and word choice. But it's like a cake. If we focused on the frosting and the cake falls flat, it's not going to make any sense. Because if you have to write long sections over again, you're going to make those grammar mistakes again. It's just part of their natural patterns. So don't be surprised if the first couple of times that you work with a tutor, they're going to be focusing on the bigger things first. Does that make sense? All right. And so that, like I said, that feedback happens in layers. So when you submit your writing, be very clear with the tutor what you want feedback on. Like, I really want to make sure that my introduction is solid, or I'm concerned about, are my paragraphs focusing on one idea, or am I bouncing around too much? Is my conclusion solid? Am I, paraphrasing this well enough? Because if you're writing an APA, less than 10% of your paper gets to be direct quotes. The rest of it has to be paraphrased. And that's very common in grad school. So you being able to explain things in your own words is really critical. And I'm running out of time, so I gotta hurry. All right, support's available, your faculty, your classmates, the Writing Center, the library, and don't forget the CAPS Counseling and Psychological Services. This is a lot. If you need someone to talk to or vent, or, if things are getting stressful, please reach out and get that support. You don't have to do this alone. Some organizations for graduate writing, also our Writing Center's website. If you go to the intranet, we've got a graduate link that's got a ton of different resources that are available. And some general writing tips. So really pay attention to style. Is it direct and concise? Does it need to be technical, or can it be narrative? Make sure that you're clear about what your instructor expects. Tone, most likely it's going to be formal and academic. Point of view, be really careful about this. Those of you who've been out of school for a while, don't use second person point of view unless your instructor allows it. That's the you, we, our, and us. You're not talking to your reader. You want to use that third person point of view. It's more of an objective kind of style. You don't put in I, you don't put in you, we, our, us. If it creeps in there, that's okay. Get feedback. Our writing patterns will often, those things will come into there, but just know that you may have to revise those out. Active and passive voice. It can be really easy to slip into the passive voice, but the chemists, if there are any chemists in there, that's their favorite point of view, because it's not the person that they're interested in. They're interested in the object and the action. So what's going on with the chemicals? They don't care about the who. Active is going to be more concerned with the subject, with the who is doing the action. So that's the differences in active and passive and where they might be appropriate or not in particular disciplines. Again, overusing jargon to the detriment of clarity is a big problem. So make sure that you're trying to be clear, concise, and also, you know, being aware that it needs to be readable too. All right, first person, we're almost done, I promise. So for those of you going into the health sciences and the social sciences, person first language is really important. Historically, we've heard terms like developmentally disabled. That's putting a label on a person that we are no longer doing. So you want to say this is an individual who has this. So make sure that you're using person first language and not labeling someone with a disability or an impairment of some sort. And as I mentioned, the Writing Center has a lot of great resources for grad students. If there's something that you ever have a question about, we may not know the answer, but our expertise is helping you find the answer. So that's what we really enjoy doing. Any questions? Was there any, oh, go ahead.
So some of the like the chart information chart, some of those charts, is there any way we can get those? I thought they were really helpful, especially if you are not an expert in writing.
Absolutely. So Christopher Lewis said he was going to give everyone a copy of the power of the workshop today. And I told him that I was also going to give him a link to the PowerPoint. So you'll have all of those.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Other questions?
I do have a quick question, if
Sure.
that's okay. I jumped in a little late and I really apologize for that, but I was actually down to U of M. So, but I'm just wondering on the resource, is the Writing Center the best resource that we could use?
For getting writing support?
Yeah, or having questions or anything of that nature.
I would say your instructor will be your first primary resource, and then probably the Writing Center and the library.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Because your professors are going to have firsthand knowledge of the conventions of your particular discipline. So they'll be able to answer those big questions, but getting feedback on your work, they may or may not have time to give a lot of dedicated feedback. So I think it's more of a partnership. So having that relationship with your faculty as well as the Writing Center is going to be really helpful.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One last question.
Sure.
When we have to do presentations like this, how can you help a student create that?
Yes, thank you so much for asking that. We also help with presentations. So whether that's creating the presentation or also getting feedback on your presentation performance, we can do that as well. We also help with resumes, cover letters, mock interviews, scholarship essays. So if you can write it, we can give you feedback.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Did this help to ease your mind a little bit about writing in grad school, or did it make it worse?
Yes, it made it worse, but it helped.
Well, we are definitely here, and I hope this eases your mind. At the Writing Center, I never wanted to leave because it was so supportive. And like I said in the very beginning, for those of you that weren't there at the beginning, I struggled with writing. Writing was not my strength, but it was something that I wanted to do. And because of the challenges that I've gone through to become a strong writer, I've learned how to share those with other people. So I love it. It's amazing. I think writing is a very empowering skill to have, and we don't judge people. If you're in grad school and you still feel like you're writing like a sophomore in undergrad, we don't judge that. We take you wherever you are and help you to get to be wherever you can. So we work with you at whatever stage you are in.
Well, Vicki, thank you so much for being
Thank
here
you.
today, for sharing all of this valuable information. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And as Vicki said, we have been recording this, so I will be posting that, and we'll be sending out links, I believe, tomorrow, with all of the links for all of the presentations. And Vicki said she's gracious enough to share the link to the PowerPoint, so we can share that out as well. So we'll be passing all of that on to you to be able to provide you with this valuable information that you can use in the future. So thank you, Vicki, and I appreciate your time today.